Thanks for joining us, everyone. We're here today with Carey Newman, executive editor at Fortress Press and editor of a new book by Walter Brueggemann titled Ancient Echoes, Refusing the Fear-Filled, Greed-Driven Toxicity of the Far Right. Carey is the author of several of his own books, and Walter Brueggemann is William Marcellus McPheeters Professor Emeritus of Old Testament at Columbia Theological Seminary. An ordained minister in the United Church of Christ, Walter is regarded as the premier Old Testament interpreter and biblical theologian. Among his many publications are Prophetic Imagination and Old Testament Theology. You can learn more about him at walterbrueggemann.com and about the book at fortresspress.com. So, Carey, thanks so much for joining us. Maybe to start off, what else would you like people to know about you?
Oh, let's see. I'm a writer, theologian, New Testament scholar. I've been an editor, a publisher, a teacher, a professor. I'm a chef and the happy owner of a multi-poo. So there you go. And my most recent avocation is to be a high school football referee.
Oh, there you go. That's interesting. So you've known Walter and worked with Walter for many years. Can you describe some of the projects that you've collaborated on with him?
Yes. So my first introduction to Walter was as a theology student and as a doctoral student. I read his Vitality of Old Testament Traditions, and it absolutely transformed me in the way that I thought. And then he had two essays published in the Catholic Biblical Quarterly that I basically just memorized on structural legitimation and embrace of pain as the two trajectories through the Bible. It's a brilliant piece. When I started my teaching career, I used his books as my textbooks. And then when I did the sideways step into publishing at Westminster, one of the first volumes that I ever commissioned was the Introduction to the Old Testament at Westminster, which it paid my salary and many others for many years. It's done very, very well. And it's done well because Walter has the ability to describe what makes biblical texts tick, how the tectonic plates that rub against each other inside a biblical text. He can put his finger on that tension that's created. And he has the ability to do that in the language of the general reader, the layperson, and our culture. I mean, he can marry those two things together in a way. And then Walter's just a prophet in some respects.
Yeah.
So that was at Westminster. When I ran a university press, I had Walter's books on my list. And when I showed up at Fortress, one of the first people I signed up again was, guess who? Walter Brueggemann. So at every stop along my career, Walter has been a figure that I've measured myself against, both in terms of my own intellectual capacities and work, and then as an editor. And I'm proud to say that we're friends and colleagues and have that kind of very special relationship that develops over time.
And it's thrilling that he's still writing, too.
If Walter's drawing breath, Walter's writing. Writing is living, and living is writing for Walter.
Well, I mean, good for him. I mean, because he's been incredibly valuable, as you said, for decades now. And, one of the most revered authors and experts on, Old Testament and more. So let's talk about this new book. As I said, the title is interesting. It's called Ancient Echoes, Refusing the Fear-Filled, Greed-Driven Toxicity of the Far Right. So how did that book come about?
Walter, one of the ways he's continued to write has been to post short-form writing on various websites. And Walter also has the habit of reading very, very widely. I discovered this very early in my career, that Walter not only read biblical studies and theology, but Walter read sociology and philosophy. He read history. He read politics and contemporary analyses of culture. And so Walter found a book that was addressing these 8 toxicities, as he labels them, in our culture from the far right that are destructive. And it's like a cancerous disease on our culture. And he founded a provocation and wanted to address those. And he addressed it in the way that Walter does, by allowing the Bible, not in a proof texting sort of way. I mean, part of the problem in reading the Bible is that life is so chaotic and the Bible is so settled that how do you marry those two things together? Well, the easy thing to do is to find a passage in the Bible that looks like it just marries up like a hammer and a nail to a problem. And boy, you just use it in a flat sort of way. Well, Walter refuses that. He's a biblical theologian. He's committed to the Bible, probably more so than a lot of people who critique him sometimes from the right for not being biblical enough. But I would say this, what Walter's after is trying to allow the grammar of the Bible to become the grammar for life. He translates this deep grammar that organizes the way the Bible is into a kind of grammar that can help us organize our life. And so he used a book as a provocation to write what came to be Ancient Echoes. And it's in the title there, Ancient Echoes. Ancient because he is still unashamed and unapologetic about turning to the Bible for wisdom and guidance. And it's ancient. He will admit this. It's an ancient set of prescriptions. And that comes with baggage. But it's also echoes. It reverberates in our contemporary culture. And so he's after the way in which the ancient Bible reverberates and addresses these 8 provocations.
So can you talk about what some of those 8 are?
Oh, yes. Number one, that faith is a fiction. The faith is fiction. Why would you want to believe something so old? I mean, come on, grow up. What we need to believe in is transactional politics right now. And we can see that in our culture. You can see that people who know better will lie in front of a TV screen about what the truth is. Why? Because it's better to lie for one's political transactions. And if you're guided by faith, you can't do that. And those who engage in such a transactional activity don't believe. They just don't believe in the vitality of faith. What? Government is bad. That's another one of these provocations. The government is evil. The government is contaminated. The government is too big, too everything. And you can't be trusted. That the institutions of government are inherently bad. And I'm going to be the first, and Walter would be as well, to say that there's a large segment of our population that has experienced systemic oppression. And that systemic oppression is housed in governmental bodies and procedures. There's just no doubt about it that we live in a world that has racism sewn into it. But that still doesn't mean that we can't do things together for the common good. So Walter's going to challenge the notion that all government is bad. Oh, another one, that science itself is suspect. Can't believe in science. Science it's just a twisted form of rhetoric. It's a tool of those who are in power. And Walter kind of shakes his head, appeals to Sirach and the wisdom of Ben Sira to say, no, not so fast. Wisdom is a good thing. And wisdom encompasses not only what is gleaned when you read the biblical text, but wisdom lives in a lot of places. And it is discoverable. And so, again, he's going to contest that, science is to be distrusted. That liberty is cashed out as selfishness. What it means to be free really means meism. And it doesn't. Liberty is a cherished thing, and we enjoy it. And I happen to live in the great and sovereign state of Texas, where liberty is a very valued social good. And if you go to West Texas, you discover, don't fence me in is a way of life. And but we always have to remember that liberty is a corporate arrangement. And there are always agreed upon restrictions. When I step onto a plane to fly somewhere, I agree that some of my movement needs to be restricted. I agree that, as much as I don't want to, I have to put my seat up before we take off. I mean, there are things that we do. We just agree that this is okay for safety reasons, for the other in our life. And so Walter is going to push against the notion of liberty as just pure selfishness. That inequality is a bad thing. Inequality has been, that equality is a bad thing. And inequality has been treated as a kind of social given. It's not a bad thing to be unequal. And he's going to challenge that we all should be working for equality for the other and justice for the other. And that these are great, common, social, neighborly things you do. Mm-hmm. When the limbs fall from the tree in my neighbor's yard, and she's a widow, I should go over and clean up her yard for her. Mm-hmm. I should. It's what you do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't just take care of my yard. I take care of my neighbor's yard. Well, I mean, those are so you can see how these, and what's toxic about our culture right now is that on most of these issues, we have decided wrongly. The gravity has come to rest for a lot of us on the wrong side of these issues. And the grammar of the Bible has not become the grammar of our corporate life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that in the title you highlight the word greed, right? Because to me, that's what's underlying basically all of us.
Greed is good.
How's that?
Well, that's what, if you're godless, greed is your God. It is your totem. It is what you're going to worship. What else is there? What else is there? I mean, power and greed and the aggregation of self. Well, that's all that's left if you don't have a God invited to the conversation. And what Walter does is to say, you can't have a conversation about life without having the God of the biblical text there to talk to you about what constitutes life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And faith is nothing other than pulling up a chair for the God who raised Jesus to come and sit down and talk with us about what constitutes life.
So what was it like working with him on this book?
So I will tell you, working with Walter is a joy because it's really advanced chess. So I can remember the day that I commissioned this book on Old Testament introduction and flew back to Louisville, and weeks later, this is back when you used to use physical mail. What a thing. And big package comes to my office. Unwrap it, and it's from Walter. It's about 150 pages of the book. And short letter says, Carey, is this what you're looking for? Hope so, Walter. You know? So I sit down and I read it, and it wasn't. And so I bled all over the page and sent it back. 6 months later, the book comes back fully formed and perfect.
Wow.
That's what it is to work with Walter.
Wow, really?
All you have to do is nudge him, and he fills out the rest of the page.
Wow. He's
a pro. And a lot of the times you don't even need to nudge him. He already has it. And, you know, it's like working with Walter is like trying to edit Mozart. I mean, it's a fool's errand to try and do it.
Well,
yeah, he does things that drive me crazy. So if you look at the page, and even in Ancient Echoes, I've tried to get him to stop doing this, but it's so much part of his the way that he works. I mean, he has these bulleted lists. He has sub numbers. He has, 5 things of this and 7 of that. And I go, no, Walter, be a better poet. Be a better poet. And it's the way that he works. And there's something about it. I've come to understand that this is how he not only thinks, but it's also how people get to look into the workroom of his thoughts. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I've just given up. I mean, sometimes people are so idiosyncratic that working with them is to mess them up.
It kind of reminds me of, what I heard when I was working on behalf of Frederick Buechner. Trying to edit, his work. I mean, these people that are brilliant and so gifted, like Walter and Buechner were, it's just like,
don't mess with
brilliance shine through.
Don't mess with it. But whatever Walter is doing is not a recipe. During COVID, I've become a chef, and so I'm trying all kinds of things. And I tried my hand at a chicken korma the other night, and it was a very elaborate. I mean, Indian cooking is very, very subtle, and you've got to build flavor over multiple layers. And it didn't come out. The korma didn't come out all that great. The chicken was great, but the korma itself, not so much. So I tried my hand at it again, and I did not follow what was a recipe. In other words, I thought about it for a day or two, and I said, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. And the way that I did it was based upon a path that I had followed before in making curry. And do you know, it came out right. And it approximated what chicken kormas I've had in fine Indian restaurants before. And Walter is not a recipe writer. There's nothing recipe about him. He just does it. He does it because he knows how to do it. It's in his bones.
And, he stayed relevant and contributing amazingly for so long.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to? The sheer brilliance, or his ability to understand, today's culture and the sociology and historical kinds of things that you said he reads, or what is it?
I think number one, he's inherently curious. He's curious. And the second thing is he's humble. He's humble in the sense that he knows he doesn't know it all, and he takes that curiosity that's inside of him, and he goes and he reads. He pays other people the great compliment of actually reading their work seriously. Walter still reads, a book every day or two. He does. He's just as voracious in his reading. And he pays compliments to authors, even those he disagrees with, by reading them seriously. Now, those two things are very, very important. And if left alone, curiosity and humility and voraciousness of reading, that probably would have gotten close to where Walter is, but there's the secret sauce to Walter is a much deeper attribute, and that is he is called. He is possessed by something that's bigger than he is. And my gosh, Brian, don't we all want to be possessed by something bigger than us? Isn't that something? Isn't that a lack? And don't we all want to do something that's bigger than us?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and Walter has been and is still obligated. Ernst Käsemann, a great German theologian, and I would say this, that if you might ask me who's analogous to Walter, and I thought about this question, and I would say that Käsemann for me is the other great figure. Some might say Bultmann, but Käsemann had this edge to him, as Walter has it. Käsemann read and was a realist about politics and about people. I mean, there was no sleight of hand with Käsemann. I mean, he had his cards turned over on what he would write about reality. He didn't hide anything. And Käsemann had this German word for, Germans are great for creating these compound nouns. And he called Paul's gospel a Machtgabe, a power gift. Macht, power, Gabe, gift. Machtgabe. That when you receive the gift, it obligates you. It's like one of my mother-in-law's Christmas presents. When she gives it with a story. And that story, wow, that's a script for using the gift that she gives you.
Interesting.
And there's a script that comes with the Bible. If you receive the God of the Bible, well, there's a script. There's an obligation. And I think Walter is obligated to be a force. And he has been.
It seems like one of his gifts is synthesis.
Yes.
You know what I mean? He can take in so much, right? As you said, from all these different sources, obviously including the Bible. But it's not just taking it in, it's also synthesizing, and kind of spitting it back out, so to speak, in a cogent, understandable fashion.
He's almost, we tune into news TV shows and listen to those who talk to us about what's going on in our country. And lots of times the people who populate the tables and the interviews are people who have this ability to take very complex things and turn them into very digestible, short, pithy little sayings. I don't want to call them sound bites because it's to denigrate what Walter does, but Walter has this ability to make what is very complex remain complex through a very short saying that allows you to appreciate the complexity and to feel the insistence of the text itself upon your life. I mean, this is Walter for me is an early Bart that allows the biblical text to kind of thunder and storm over the lives of those who would read it. I remember I was in the back of the room. Walter's was talking to a group of Baptists, and Walter's not a Baptist. He preaches like one, but he's not one. And he chided the Baptists in the room today because this is a group of Bible thumpers, and he said, all of you claim the Bible as your source of authority, sole source of authority. And that's good. Okay, I get that. He says, but when you stand to preach a sermon, you're embarrassed by the very text you say you adhere to. And I know you are because you spend the first 10 minutes of your sermon trying to introduce the sermon and the text, trying to tame it, instead of standing and reading the text and letting it thunder and rain and lightning over the heads of the congregation. You're embarrassed by it, and you apologize and introduce it away. Shame on you.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, that's Walter. Walter believes in the power of the text and the God of the text to do its work. Get out of its way.
So looking forward, are there other book projects either that you're working on or that you and Walter are working on that you could talk about?
Let's see. This is Ancient Echoes. We've got 2 other Brueggemann books along the way.
Excellent.
Yeah. So in the fall, we've got this book, Real Faith, which, classically again in Walter's sweet spot. It's a collection of Walter's quick takes on biblical texts and marrying them again against the gritty realities of life. Mm-hmm. So again, this is it's classic Brueggemann. His writing is for theology what film noir is. There's always, it's why all the great bogey, detective shows are in black and white. Why they should never be colorized. The grittiness and the shadowiness of life itself informs, and yet there's a nobility. Even at the end of Maltese Falcon, you've got Bogey doing the right thing. Real Faith, and then we're very excited by the fact that Conrad Carnegie has agreed to allow us to publish his theological biography of Walter, and that will come out in the fall as well. And it is a real interesting book. It's a hard decision to publish a biography of a contemporary. There are not many people who merit it, and it's a bit grandiose to do so, and they even do so while the subject is still alive. But I think the pilgrimage of Walter's thought over 3 or 4 decades has made it so. And we're certainly the people to do it. Walter has published with absolutely everybody, but he's published his big books with us. And Fortress is home for Walter.
Good.
And so Conrad's a sociologist at Elizabethtown, and he's a Walter fan. But that did not blind him to working through the arc of Walter's life and showing how the arc of his life, first at Eden Theological, then Columbia, and then in Cincinnati, has changed over the years, and how the back and forth of his institutional life and his own confessional pilgrimage shaped and helped informed his own theological trajectory. And then in the spring, we're going to republish a book that got lost along the way. The University of South Carolina commissioned these explorations of biblical figures. So David and Abraham and Moses in the Old Testament and Pilate and John the Baptist and Paul in the New Testament. And it was a relatively large series of volumes that University of South Carolina commissioned and slowly drip, drip, drip over the years brought out. A lot of those books, one or two of them got a lot of attention, but a number of them went underappreciated. So we went back, grabbed everything that was still left on the table at USC, and we're republishing them. And among those is Walter's book on Solomon. And this is like, I mean, it is a phenomenally good book that no one knows about. So it's almost like a new book, and that will be out in the spring of 24.
Wow. Well,
so we still have Brueggemann on the stove cooking away.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. That there's so much to look forward to. So for now, the new book is Ancient Echoes: Refusing the Fear-Filled, Greed-Driven Toxicity of the Far Right. You can go to walterbrueggemann.com to learn about that, and obviously all of his books, and of course fortresspress.com to learn about this new book, as well as these books that are coming out. So Carey, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing all this history and brilliance that you've been working on together with Walter.
Well, it's a joy. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.